Hey guys, thanks for joining us for episode 7 of Weathering the Market. Kailey Carey here.
With Dion DeLeo.
And Emily Creevy.
Everyone's here today because we have a big topic. We are talking about what happened last week.
It was quite the event, and even if you're not in the United States, I'm sure you're well aware of what has happened over here. It's very rare for this type of weather to reach some of the mid-latitudes like it did. So we're going to talk a little bit about that.
But to start, so basically it was stratospheric warming. Stratowarms occur every year, but when they originate over Asia and happen early, it turns into basically kind of like this classic situation, what we just experienced. And in late December, we were already kind of eyeing this. When I say we, I say meteorologists. We kind of saw this shift, and then we were predicting stratospheric warming to reach the poles around mid-January. So when this started taking place in mid-January, typically the worst of it, that was air quotes, happens typically 3 weeks after, but that cold and the event can linger up to 60 days.
That's right. So we were actually looking at impacts over portions of Northern Europe and Northern Asia as early as the first week of February. The UK recorded the coldest February on record since 1955 at minus 9.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Portions of Scandinavia and Latvia got down to 16 degrees Fahrenheit, which is extremely cold for them. And they've also received lots and lots of snow as well. Germany saw impacts from this as early as February 8th. So about a whole week before it even reached the United States, they were looking at temperatures like minus 4 degrees Fahrenheit. All in all, it started over there before it came this way.
Correct. That's right. So stratospheric warming is, what we're calling this, but the polar vortex actually stayed north of the U.S. So what happened? La Nina. Okay, so we're in a La Nina shadow worm. That changes things. It's basically massive buildup of high pressure, and all that cold air just kind of whooshed down. Yes, that is a technical term. Whooshed. So it resulted in a negative Arctic oscillation, and so we're still seeing that negative AO right now. And when the stratoworms happen, pressure rises in that polar atmosphere, and cold air just continues to build, and basically kind of acts like a lot of water behind a dam, and basically the dam broke, and all of that cold Arctic air basically just kind of filtered in to the central portion of the United States at this time. And I think it is worth noting that stratoworms are more frequent during a solar min and solar max. And Emily, you know this. What did we just finish? What are we in right now?
We're in a solar minimum.
That's right, because that was from, I can't remember what episode that was when we were talking about solar minimum, but
for the sunspots and diseases.
It was, yes,
Y'all
check it out.
Listen to that
it's
one.
A great one, yes. So stratoworms are more frequent during those times. So the stratosphere has cooled, but there is definitely the potential for it to warm again. And some, are forecasting mid to late March, we could see that flip again. So weather-wise, that's what happened. But let's kind of dig into power situations. Okay?
It was a total mess.
I literally thought I was going to die. Yeah. Okay, maybe not die, but
a little traumatic. Yes.
My house was a refrigerator.
Yes, it was. People not living in Texas might not understand, but water was freezing. Like, there was icicles coming out of faucets.
Yeah, okay, that was crazy because, we had no power. Okay, well, one, it was cold, right? So they were like, okay, just turn on your heaters. And then the power went out. Can't turn on your heaters. And then the water went out. And people were like, well, boil your water. We were like, with what? I don't have a fireplace. I don't have a gas stove. So there was no water, guys. And then they were like, well, just go to the warming centers. And then we were like, well, we can't get there, guys. The roads are iced over. Anyways, mess.
It was.
I think we're certainly showing our text in here and all this. I think it's worth noting because even if it snows a couple of inches, roads get absolutely terrible down here. The infrastructure just is not cut out, especially when you start getting multiple inches of snow. The roads get really bad down here, and of course, a majority of Texans have a hard time driving in that type of weather. It's just a fact, and there's no amount of four-wheel drive that can really help you, especially with that amount of ice and that amount of snow.
Okay, so I think the question, especially living in Texas, we're all thinking, how could this happen? We're Texas, the nation's largest energy producer, home to several of the world's biggest energy companies. And I feel like some would even argue one of the energy capital of the world. Agreed?
I'm pretty sure we actually hit that point.
Everyone's wondering what is going on, because at peak Tuesday morning, there were almost 4.5 million customers without power. That's not people, that's customers. So within that, several people live in a household, an apartment complex, and whatnot. Like that's a lot. And then not being from Texas, who basically is in control of the power grid here?
ERCOT.
There we go. ERCOT. Yes, there you go. The Electric Reliability Council of Texas. And that's not only the name of our grid, but it's also the name of the agency that runs it. It's 15 members. It's basically a board of directors. But ERCOT is subject to oversight from the PUC. And PUC is the Public Utility Commission. And you guessed it, they regulate utilities.
Everything.
Utilities, yeah.
Yes. Okay. And good job, guys. And that's ran basically, it's 3 commissioners appointed by the governor. This is a piece of information I want you to hold on to until we circle back to it. Late 90s, early 2000s, Texas deregulated its electricity market to create a competitive marketplace. Okay? I think we can all respect that. Let me take you through some numbers and we're going to talk about some things. So back in November leading into this winter, ERCOT issued its regular 2020-21 winter assessment. So basically a winter outlook, which we put one of those together, right, Dion?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's basically to assess the adequacy of generation and kind of assess what they need to have in storage. So the assessment forecasted 83,000 megawatts of capacity to be available, okay? But this is important too. Only 963 megawatts of that was supposed to be wind and solar because wind is seasonal and has low projections because of the time of year. So wind really isn't something that we in Texas count on for power at this time of year. So of that 83,000, only 963 megawatts, that's minimal, was supposed to be part of that, okay? So basically wind...
A drop in the bucket, basically.
Right, basically. And normal peak load is projected near 60,000 megawatts. And the previous extreme was 65,000 megawatts. So we're thinking, man, at 83, we should be good. And then what happened? Over 30,000 megawatts went down due to freeze-related issues. The natural gas lines froze, plant equipment froze. STP, which is one of the 4 nuclear plants in Texas, it tripped. So when that tripped on Monday at 5:37 p.m. around, that was the single worst moment because you can't just put it back on because there's such a power surge. Then it could knock out the power grids. That was devastating. So losing those 30,000 megawatts. So let's do some math. What's 83,000 minus 30,000?
Well, now you're sitting around
53,000.
Go, Emily. Okay, and so on the evening of February 14th, the demand went just under 68,000. We didn't have it, right?
Oh, we're off by 15.
Right. So the question is, did deregulation cause this? No, I don't think so.
I don't
Because
think
guess
so.
what? No, because guess what? It's just because this was before our time. But the same thing happened just in December 1989 when Texas was fully regulated.
Oh.
Yes. Okay. So I'm not saying it's a free pass, but I'm saying this has happened before. Texas power plants, we're just not designed to handle sub-freezing temperatures for extended periods of time, or in this case, several days. Because power plants up north, they're designed differently, and their electricity bills are different as well.
Very much so.
Yes.
That is one thing that especially as a resident here in Texas, that I certainly appreciate is that Texas has what we call it's called power to choose. And anytime you move somewhere, in the state, you get to openly choose your local energy service provider, but it's a competitive market. It's a very competitive market.
Right.
So it keeps costs down for consumers.
Correct. Yeah. And up north, it's kind of the same thing. Do you want to buy a Honda or a Mercedes? What are we going to pay for here? But this weather was on the extreme side. This is the last time that this kind of stuff happened was 1989, 51, 40, and then I don't think any of us were around in 1899, but it was that cold here for that extended period of time. That's right. You never know. But so the question is, would winterization have helped? Yes, maybe, but probably not, because up north, a lot of the turbines that run the machines, they're below deck. So it's a different situation. I think the good news out of all this is that ERCOT did save the grid.
As best they could.
I
think given the circumstances, as best they could, they did. And I think the whole incident in general really opened our eyes to, while this isn't a common thing that we face here in the South, what can we learn from this, and how can we improve on this to continue to be not only one of the top energy producers in the world, but dependable and reliable.
Mm-hmm. Another question that's being raised a lot is, would connecting to a national grid have helped instead of being isolated?
I don't believe so.
And you know what? I don't either.
Well, it was just a hard time for everybody.
It was cold everywhere.
But the thing is that's what I want people to understand, is that we're not really isolated, because Texas is interconnected with both MISO and SPP. Like, we have channels where we can get energy from them, but you can only get energy when there's a surplus. And at that time, there was not a surplus. They were in rolling blackouts as well. I think that's what everyone's forgetting, is like a lot of other grids were having rolling blackouts at this time. Texas was just hit so hard because of the circumstances.
Right.
The population density, and then the STP unit tripping on Monday. It was a lot. You can't import power when someone doesn't have a surplus. That's where we were. So I don't know if being connected to the national grid would help, but that's just my opinion. I mean, I'm sure if there's a solution, happy to hear it. But I don't know. That's kind of what happened.
Would you be willing to have your electricity prices go up in order to possibly winterize it? I mean, what happened was just so bad. Like, there were multiple people that died. People still can't get water today.
Yes, it's bad.
It's been more than a week now.
Yes.
Like, so would you be willing to make have everyone's prices go up a little bit, maybe just to get us winterized?
I think it's something that's it's worth discussing, worth looking at. You have to understand our biggest issue in the state of Texas, especially in the state of Texas, it comes from the fact that, like, our summers are brutal, plain and simple. Everywhere from the Panhandle all the way down to the Gulf Coast, summers in Texas are brutal. And as consumers, we typically rely on these lower rates during the longer extended summers, because we start hitting air conditioner temperatures, as early as early April.
My air conditioning is on right now, actually. Literally right now.
Yeah.
It's like 80 degrees
and
out here.
then it doesn't really cool down here. We typically don't get our first real cold snap that affects the entire state until like late October, early November. Places start cooling down, but not enough to the point where you're like, oh, I might need a heater all of a sudden. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of you kind of weigh out the options between the two.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. We'll have to see. And we also saw that they're looking at, or someone's proposing, moving Harris County to MISO, which would be a huge load off of ERCOT, because that's the most densely populated county. And if you're not from Texas, that's where Houston's located. So Harris County, the population is...
It's the fourth most populous city in the United States.
Right. So, I mean, it's up there. So that would take a huge load off of ERCOT, and I don't know, be interesting to see what happens, what they say. So just something to think about. Thanks for listening, guys. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you.
We'll be back next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Weathering the Market. We love sharing all this information with you guys, and if you didn't already know, we work for a company called Minuteman Weather, which provides a full range of energy and agricultural weather services. If you would like to sign up for a free trial or request more information, check us out at minutemanweather.com. We'll be back next Wednesday.